Welcome to the Stoic Station. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what it really means when your ex is silent after a breakup. But not in the way most people do. Not with cliches, not with tactics, not with desperate hope dressed up as logic. I want to take you deeper, into the quiet space most people run from. Because after the breakup, that's what remains: silence. Not just from her, but from life, from routine, from the parts of yourself you forgot you gave away. And that silence, it can either break you, or it can reveal you. You see, many men enter no contact expecting a quick fix, a strategy to spark regret, to pull her back, to rewrite the story. But when the days stretch on, and there's still no sign of her, panic sets in. They think they're doing it wrong. They think the silence means she's moving on, that she's forgetting. But what if silence isn't forgetting? What if it's remembering? What if the very thing you're resisting is the doorway to becoming someone she never expected to lose? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't about games. It's about transformation. So if you've been stuck in that place, checking your phone, reading signs, questioning your worth, this message is for you. Hit like if this already speaks to something real inside you, and if you're ready to stop chasing and start becoming. Subscribe to Stoic Station. Let's begin. There's a moment after the breakup when everything gets quiet, not just around you, but inside you. The constant texts stop. The late-night calls vanish, the shared routines, the little check-ins, the good morning messages, the subtle comforts of being known by someone disappear. And what's left is silence. For most men, that silence feels like abandonment, like the final proof that she never really cared, that she moved on with ease, that everything you built together was disposable, and maybe, just maybe, you were the only one holding on. But I want you to consider something not many people are willing to tell you when your heart is bruised and your pride is fractured. What if that silence isn't rejection? What if it's simply the beginning of a transition? You see, silence doesn't always come from apathy. Sometimes it's the natural space someone needs after making a difficult decision. The end of a relationship, even one they chose, still carries emotional weight. Your ex might be in what we call the relief phase. That doesn't mean she's celebrating the breakup. It means she's trying to convince herself it was the right choice. That first wave of relief is deceptive. It's a temporary high, an illusion of clarity. It feels like freedom, the ability to say yes to plans without checking in, to sleep without tension, to scroll through life without emotional responsibility. She might even post pictures smiling with friends, go out more, dress up, or say she feels lighter. But that's not healing, that's distraction. And here's the truth most men overlook in this phase. Your absence doesn't just vanish, it lingers. It settles into the spaces you used to fill. And if the connection between you was real, emotionally, physically, spiritually, then your silence doesn't feel like a blank page. It feels like an unfinished chapter. There's a gravitational pull in that kind of silence, the kind that isn't loud or dramatic, but steady and unmistakable. It draws them back, not because you're playing games, not because you're trying to manipulate the situation, but because you've stopped chasing and started existing without their validation. That shift is powerful, because for the first time, you're not trying to convince her of your worth. You're letting your absence speak for itself. And if you've ever had value in her eyes, your silence will force her to confront the one thing distraction can't cover forever: the void. Silence, when it's earned, not used as a tactic but as a reflection of inner strength, becomes a kind of boomerang. It doesn't scream or beg or plead. It just echoes. And sometimes the pullback is just as fast and just as surprising. as the way she left. You don't have to orchestrate it. You don't have to sit there counting days or waiting for a text. The beauty of this space is that it's not about her anymore. It's about you. Who you become when no one is looking. Who you choose to be when love isn't being handed to you. And here's where things begin to shift on her end. At first, the freedom feels intoxicating. She's finally unburdened. She can breathe. She's surrounded by people telling her she made the right decision. Friends encourage her to move on. Maybe she even starts seeing someone new, not because she's found something better, but because she's trying to outrun the silence you left behind. But time has a way of stripping the illusion away. The laughter starts to feel forced, the attention doesn't feel earned, the novelty fades, and one night, maybe at a dinner, maybe alone in bed, she remembers something. The way you looked at her, the sound of your voice when she was hurting, the calm you brought into the room without even speaking. She remembers the man who showed up, and suddenly she's not so sure anymore, because here you are, not chasing, not posting vague emotional stories, not liking her photos, not playing the part of the desperate, heartbroken ex. You're still, you're silent, and that silence has weight. She expected you to reach out. Most men do. She expected apologies, long messages, maybe a late night "I miss you," but none of that came. And now her ego is confused. Her certainty begins to wobble, because the man who once made her feel adored has disappeared without asking for permission. And that flips the story. You were supposed to be broken. Instead, you're rebuilding. You were supposed to chase. Instead, you're choosing dignity. You were supposed to prove you still care. But what you've done is something far more powerful. You've made her wonder if she misjudged your worth. And here's the paradox. It's not about punishing her. It's not about getting revenge or holding back affection just to seem strong. It's about anchoring yourself in the truth that your presence had meaning. And now so does your absence. Let her have her space. Let her test the waters. Let her believe, for now, that freedom is the better path. Because eventually the silence will outlast the distraction. Eventually, the echoes will get louder than the noise. And when she looks around and realizes that no one makes her feel the way you did, not just seen, but safe, understood, challenged, steady, she'll come face to face with a deeper truth. Freedom only feels good when it's not running from something real. So yes, in the beginning, silence hurts. It tests your resolve. It tempts you to reach out just to feel human again. But every time you hold the line, every time you choose stillness over desperation, you reclaim a piece of your power. Because silence is not a tactic. It's a mirror. It reflects who you are when no one is watching, and what she gave up before fully understanding what she had. And maybe, just maybe, when the silence becomes too loud to ignore, she'll turn around, not to find a man still waiting, but a man who found himself in the quiet. That's when everything begins to shift. But silence isn't just something they experience, it's something they learn from. And what they begin to feel in your absence often teaches more than anything you could have said while you were still there. Because sometimes it's not the presence that makes someone realize your worth. It's the quiet after you've stopped trying to prove it. There's a quiet kind of power that most people never learn to use. It's not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't plead or explain. It simply steps away and lets the silence speak. After a breakup, especially one you didn't initiate, your instincts will scream for connection. You'll want to be understood. You'll want to explain what they misunderstood, what they overlooked, what they forgot. But the more you reach, the more invisible you begin to feel. And deep down, you know this. They don't hear you when you talk anymore. Not because your words have no meaning, but because your presence became too accessible. That's why your absence matters. Not as a punishment, not as manipulation, but as a declaration of self-respect. When you are no longer invited into someone's life, whether through their words, their actions, or their silence, you do the one thing that most don't have the strength to do. You walk away without protest. And that's not weakness, that's not defeat, that's dignity. Because the truth is, people rarely miss what's always there. They take it for granted. It becomes background noise, but the moment it vanishes, something shifts. What once felt ordinary starts to feel rare. The steady comfort they dismissed begins to echo in the quiet. Not because you begged for their attention, but because you stopped asking for it. It's not about closing the door with resentment. It's about leaving it open, but not waiting on the other side. You exit their life in a way that's so still, so graceful, it leaves a mark. Because absence, when it's grounded in strength, forces them to re-evaluate everything your presence used to offer. And the beauty of it is, they can't replace it overnight. Because you weren't just someone who showed up, you were someone who stayed, who understood, who listened. And now, your absence isn't just noticed, it's felt, deeply, and in places they didn't expect. But here's what makes your silence even more powerful: the mystery it creates. We live in a world addicted to closure, to answers, to instant explanations. So when someone doesn't respond, doesn't explain, doesn't rush to defend themselves or seek validation, it breaks the pattern. They expect to hear from you, to know how you're doing, to read your emotions through late-night texts or accidental stories. But when you don't show up, not in their inbox, not in their feed, not in their life, it leaves them with questions they can't answer. And that is where attraction begins again. Not in certainty, but in wonder, in the tension between what they thought they knew and what they no longer understand. Curiosity is uncomfortable, and that discomfort creates energy, movement, pull. Why haven't you reached out? Have you moved on? Did you ever care as much as they assumed? Did they underestimate you? The mind doesn't let those questions go easily. They linger, they replay, they start to build their own momentum, because mystery is more magnetic than confession. And the more someone wonders about you, the more space you occupy in their mind, even if they're too proud to admit it. You don't need to give them answers. Let the mystery do its work. Let them sit with the questions. Let them wrestle with the silence that once felt like freedom, but now feels like distance they can't close without effort. This is how emotional gravity works. Not by pulling them with force, but by making them feel the lack of your presence and wonder what it truly meant. They don't miss what clings. They miss what lets go without needing to be chased. And if they ever come back, it won't be because you convinced them. It will be because something in them remembered what it felt like to lose something that didn't try to be kept. Let your silence be that reminder. But as powerful as your silence can be, not everything they send your way deserves a response, because sometimes what looks like a sign is really just a test. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake their crumbs for clarity and walk right back into a game you were never meant to play. There's a moment in nearly every breakup when your phone lights up, not with a heartfelt message, not with a call to talk, but with something small: a like on your photo, a quick reaction to your story, a casual congrats or that's funny left under a post. And in that instant, your heart jolts. For a second, it feels like hope. But what you're really feeling is the hunger to be seen again. This is where you need to pause and ask yourself a harder question. Are they reaching out because they miss me? Or are they just checking that I'm still waiting? Because the truth is, most of these gestures aren't reconnection. They're control. Small signals designed to test the water, a way for them to gauge how much space they still occupy in your mind. And if you respond too eagerly, too quickly, they get their answer. You're still there, still watching, still hoping, still vulnerable to their inconsistency. It's easy to misread those little moments, especially when you're hurting. When the nights get quiet and the memories feel sharp, even a like can feel like a lifeline. But loneliness has a way of dressing up crumbs as signs of love. It whispers, maybe they miss you. It convinces you that something small could be the beginning of something real again. But here's what you must remember. You are not a dog waiting beneath the table for scraps. You are the table. You don't chase people who've chosen to walk away. You don't celebrate breadcrumbs. You don't reward someone for doing the bare minimum to stay in your life. If you want respect, if you want something lasting, it has to be built on intentional effort, not convenient flashes of attention. When someone genuinely misses you, they don't linger in the shadows of your digital life. They reach out with clarity. They speak with purpose. They want to see you, talk to you, understand what changed, and maybe fix it. And if they're not doing that, then they're not reaching out. They're just reminding you they still can. That's why your response matters. Because the moment you leap at those fragments, you tell them everything they want to know, that they can leave and still be admired, that they can choose silence and still be comforted, that they can give less than what you deserve and still be rewarded with your attention. And the sad truth? That feeds their ego more than their heart. But it doesn't stop there. Sometimes their silence is deliberate, not because they've moved on, but because they're waiting for you to break, to fold first, to reach out, to apologize, to soothe the discomfort they feel about ending something that once meant everything. And when you do, you hand them the story they've been hoping to write. You become the one chasing, the one needing, the one still holding on. You may think you're just trying to ease your pain, but to them, it confirms the power dynamic they crave. You become a character in their ego story, and the more you give, the less they feel compelled to do anything at all. That's why emotional discipline is everything in this phase. The silence between you isn't just an absence of communication, it's a test of who you are without their validation. And yes, it's painful. It will burn. You'll feel it in your chest, in your throat, in the spaces where their voice used to live. But if you can sit with that discomfort instead of running from it, if you can hold your ground instead of grabbing at whatever crumbs they toss your way, then something begins to shift. You stop acting from need, and you start standing from worth. Let them wonder why you haven't responded. Let them question whether you're truly done. Let them feel the silence not as a pause, but as your answer. Because real connection doesn't come from pressure or performance. It comes from two people who meet each other fully, without having to play roles, chase illusions, or beg for clarity. So the next time they offer you a flicker of attention wrapped in casual convenience, ask yourself, does this come from love, or does it come from fear of being forgotten? And then choose not to answer the question for them. Let them feel what life is like when your attention is no longer guaranteed. Let them earn their way back with presence, not with breadcrumbs. Because you weren't made to live in someone's maybe, you deserve the whole damn meal. One of the biggest mistakes men make after a breakup is believing that words will fix what presence no longer holds. You might be tempted to send a message saying you've changed. You may think if you could just explain how much you've learned, how differently you would show up now, how clearly you see everything that went wrong, she would finally understand. She would finally come back. But words don't rebuild attraction. Not the kind that lasts. Not the kind that reaches beyond logic and touches something deeper. Because attraction isn't built in the mind. It's felt. It's sensed. It happens in the quiet space between two people where energy does the talking and logic steps aside. Trying to talk your way back into her heart is like hearing someone you're not physically drawn to say, "But I'd make the perfect partner." That may be true on paper, but attraction isn't a resume. You can't negotiate your way into being wanted. And if you try, it only reinforces one thing, that you're still hoping to be chosen, rather than becoming the kind of man who no longer needs to be picked. You don't become desirable again by convincing her. You become desirable by becoming someone she feels pulled to again, someone whose presence shifts the room, whose energy is grounded, calm, quietly certain. Not desperate for attention, but deeply rooted in self-respect. That kind of presence can't be faked. It isn't born in the mirror or crafted in a caption. It's cultivated in solitude, in the mornings when no one is watching, in the decisions you make when no one's applauding, in the way you begin to treat yourself with the same care you once poured into trying to save the relationship. This isn't about becoming someone new to impress her. This is about becoming someone whole again, whether she returns or not. Because growth isn't a show, and the right kind of change doesn't need to be announced. It reveals itself in the way you move, the way you speak, the way you no longer chase validation, but quietly command it through the life you now live. When she hears about you, it won't be from a long message explaining how different you are. It'll be from a mutual friend who says you seem calmer, more focused, more alive. It'll be from seeing a photo that doesn't scream, "Look what you lost," but quietly radiates a man who found himself. That's the kind of energy that reawakens attraction, not through force, not through explanation, but through presence, through stillness, through the reality that you no longer need to be heard to be felt. The truth is, if you have to tell her you've changed, she doesn't believe it yet. But when you no longer feel the urge to say a word, it's because the change has already happened, and she'll feel it before she understands it. Let your silence carry the message your voice no longer needs to deliver. Let your evolution speak through your posture, your purpose, your peace. Because the man who's truly changed doesn't ask to be let back in. He's too busy building something worth being part of. And if she returns, it won't be to a version of you that's trying to impress her. It'll be to a man she never expected. A man who grew not to win her back, but to remember who he really was before he lost himself in trying to hold on. That's the power of presence. That's the kind of change that can't be denied. And that's the only change that truly lasts. But even as you grow, quietly, steadily, there will still be moments when doubt creeps in. Moments when their silence feels louder than ever. And that's when you need to remember, not all silence is about you. And not every impulse to reach out is as honest as it seems. Not all silence is personal, and not all distance is about you. It's a hard truth to accept, especially when you're sitting in the aftermath of what once felt unbreakable. When someone you shared everything with suddenly disappears into silence, your mind rushes to conclusions, most of which hurt. You tell yourself they must not care, that they're done, that they've already moved on. But sometimes their silence isn't theirs at all. It might be coming from somewhere else entirely. Maybe it's the friend in their ear telling them to stay strong and don't look back. Maybe it's family who never approved of you in the first place. Maybe it's their own pride, their fear of appearing weak, or the pressure to prove to everyone around them that they're doing just fine without you. Sometimes people choose silence not because they feel nothing, but because they're trying to maintain a narrative, for others, for themselves, for their ego. But the truth is, it doesn't matter where the silence comes from. It only matters how you respond to it. Because this is where a different kind of strength is born. Not in chasing answers, not in trying to break the silence with forced clarity, but in choosing to stay still, choosing to meet their uncertainty with calm, their avoidance with grace, their hesitation with inner peace. You don't have to fix what they haven't asked to be fixed. You don't have to chase after what has turned its back on you, especially when that silence might be wrapped in guilt, confusion, or social pressure that has nothing to do with your worth. Let them sort through their noise. Let them deal with the opinions they invited into your relationship. Let them sit with the consequences of listening to voices that weren't yours. Meanwhile, you focus on something much more valuable, your own growth. This is where you begin to step forward, slowly and intentionally, instead of circling the same unanswered questions. This is where you begin to heal, not because you've heard from them, but because you've finally heard yourself. And that voice inside you, the one that knows your value, the one that remembers how deeply you loved, how much you gave, and how grounded you stayed when things began to fall apart. That voice deserves to be listened to far more than any silence coming from them. Still, in the quiet, there's temptation. The urge to check in, just to see how they're doing. The need to send a small message wrapped in a casual tone, hoping they'll take the bait. You tell yourself it's harmless, that it's just kindness, that it's mature. But if you're being honest, you're not reaching out because you want to know if they're okay. You're reaching out because you're not. You want relief, you want a response, you want to feel close to them again, even if just for a second. But that second comes at a price, because what often happens next is painfully predictable. You send the message, you stare at your phone, you wait, you check the timestamp. You feel your heart tighten in your chest every minute that passes without a reply. And if they do respond, it's cold, it's short, it's distant. Maybe it's polite, but it's not what you needed. It doesn't bring closure, it doesn't rebuild anything, it only deepens the ache. And you realize, too late, that you weren't ready to reach out. You were just desperate not to feel alone. You think that small action will make you feel better, and maybe it does, for a moment. But 4 hours later, when the silence settles again, or worse, when their reply feels like a door half opened and quickly shut, the regret will speak louder than any reply ever could. Silence is hard, but it's clean. It holds space for healing, for strength, for clarity. It creates the distance you need to actually process what happened, to regain your sense of self-worth, to rebuild your energy, to remember that peace doesn't come from being chosen again. It comes from no longer needing to be. Breaking that silence for a brief dopamine hit. That's messy. That's emotional gambling. It might soothe you today, but it'll break you tomorrow when the high fades and reality comes rushing back in. This is where emotional maturity separates you from who you were in the relationship. Not because you don't care anymore, not because you've shut your heart down, but because you've finally realized that nothing real can be built on momentary relief. If you want something lasting, it has to be earned, reached, chosen, and not just by them, but by you. So let them stay silent if that's what they need. Let them play strong, surrounded by people who don't know the full story. Let them pretend that walking away cost them nothing, because the truth has a way of surfacing when the noise dies down. And while they're still trying to prove a point to everyone else, you'll be living yours, in silence, in strength, in presence. And that's something no one can ignore forever. Summary. What I've shared with you isn't just about silence. It's about reclaiming your place in the world when love walks away. This journey hasn't been about chasing, convincing, or proving. It's been about choosing stillness over desperation, presence over promises, and growth over guessing games. Because in the end, the man who no longer needs to be chosen becomes the one who stands out without saying a word. That's the real shift. That's the life lesson. True change doesn't ask to be seen. It becomes undeniable. If this message spoke to something real inside you, if it helped you breathe a little deeper, stand a little taller, then let it stay with you. Let the silence work for you, not against you. Let it sharpen you, center you, remind you. And when you're ready to keep growing through it, subscribe to Stoic Station for content that meets you exactly where you are. Like the video if it brought you value. Let that small act be a quiet yes to your journey. Stay steady. Stay grounded. Your strength is already speaking louder than words ever could.